Hi there, YouTube. It is I, Rain and Robin. Hope everyone's doing good tonight. Um, let's see, what are we doing? Today we're playing this game called The Lost Girl. Uh, the only thing I know about it is a visual novel. So if anything, we're just gonna go through a story time together. um, I know this picture, well, especially the one on the right there, looks a little promiscuous, but I'm pretty sure this is not an adult-only kind of game. So I'm hoping, anyway. Anyway. So this is the Lost Girl. As far as I know, it's about this little bunny girl and fox girl. Like they meet each other and things happen. You know, classic love story. Um, so we're gonna go through this and then see what's going on. And sorry about not uploading last night. I was doing some adjustments to the whole setup and trying to get things going. But anyway, let's go ahead and dive in here. Hope everyone's doing okay. Maybe like this? No, that doesn't sound right. Um, no, that doesn't sound right either. Maybe like... Whoa. Oh, there's my character, I'm guessing. She's a cute little bunny girl. Let's see. Maybe I should just forget it. No matter what I write down, it doesn't feel right. I wonder why. How do the pros even make it in this world? That's what I've been asking myself, honestly, since I started doing this. How do they decide what is right, what is meant to exist on paper? What story is good, what is bad? How do they always know what to say? For as long as she could remember, Serena's life was like an unfinished novel. She had spent her whole life with a book in her hands, feeling as if within its pages was the only safe place she could belong. There's a lot of people who feel that way, to be honest. But it was only recently, as she started college, that she had decided to take her fate into her own hands, to write her own novel. Good on ya. But that process, which she has been struggling to complete for the past month, has yet to make any progress at all. Unless you count the dozens of crumpled pieces of paper overtowering her wastebasket. Maybe if I read them again, try to understand their process, then I could be like them. You can do it. Could be remembered for my words, my passion. Who am I kidding? I'm just some nobody from a small town. Nobody will listen to me, right? I kinda know how that feels right now. She held up a small stuffed fox, its blood-orange coat shimmering under the fluorescent light of the desk lamp. The fox was just barely big enough to cover her chest, but every time she held it, it felt like there was a fire that warmed all over. Its fur, she defended, was the softest thing she could have ever touched. It was her go-to when she needed something comforting to hold on to, which here at this university was really hard to find. I wonder what Mama is doing right now. Those little devils are probably giving her a handful. Despite herself, Serena found a smile drifting to her face. Her parents had worked hard to send her off to this small college, and an opportunity which, given their large families and low incomes, they themselves never got. They got stuck raising a family of little ones themselves, Serena being the oldest, followed by 3 younger brothers, all of which were quite troublemakers. Her mother always told her she wished they would grow out of it and soon be more like their big sister. If only they could see me now. Granted, she'd only been at college for a month, but she thought she'd be on her way to writing her first novel by now. To having at least a couple close friends around to invite her out to local food joints. To be making sincere progress in her studies. Instead, she was alone in her single dorm without a single friend, grade, or novel to show for it. She couldn't help but think that if her parents saw her now, they'd be disappointed. I have to do something, anything. I can't let their sacrifices end like this. In complete and total failure, she thought. But she wouldn't allow herself to say it out loud. Instead, she stared at her fox as she held it out a bit further from her chest, wondering if her fox plush was alive, what he would do. But it just stared back at her with those big black button eyes. Fine, Felix, I get it. You want me to figure this out on my own. She didn't get an answer, but Felix nodded his pointy ears. To this, she began to think critically instead of depressingly about what she should do to make the most of her time here. Surely there's a solution that would solve all their problems, something that would fix this. Then here. The library! Everyone that goes to the library. I kind of wonder who goes to libraries anymore, you know? We used to have one here in my area, but I think they shut it down a while ago. And it's like, unless it's at a school, most people just don't go to them anymore, do they? The library, that's it, Felix. There's a huge one right here in Everton. She slid her desk chair back in a jolt, laying the Fox Plus down haphazardly on her desk, as she did so without thought. Her attention now was solely on her desk drawer as she opened it up hungrily. Her hands moved around her notebooks and pencils, her study materials until... Aha! I've discovered it. Here it is. She pulled out a pamphlet with a photo of a large staircase surrounded by wall-to-wall with bookshelves. No bookshelf, as far as she could tell, had an empty space. Each crevice was filled with an infinite number of books, all with their own intricate bindings and color schemes. Fancy. She could get lost in just the picture, but she steadied her mind. Now more than ever, she needed to focus. Let's see. Oh, it's just a few blocks down, too. Guess I've been so busy settling in, I haven't really had time to think about exploring. Though she made sure to pick up the library's pamphlet as soon as she saw it from Everton Local College's directory. That's a long sentence. On her first day of classes, she had spent the first 2 weeks unpacking all her stuff into her dorm. And not long after, she got quite a few difficult assignments involving essay papers about famous scientists who really didn't pique her interest at all. But now her assignments were caught up as far as she knew. She could finally take some time to go see it. Hooray! This is perfect, Felix. Tomorrow's Saturday, so I don't have class. I can spend all day there. I can read some novels to help me with mine, study for my first exams, and maybe even make some friends there. I've heard it's so big you can actually get lost in the shelves. It's a book lover's paradise. Nice. In the back of her mind, she knew it wouldn't be this easy, but it made her feel better to exaggerate and talk about this as if it was taking a vacation, which to her, it honestly was. So without trying to overthink it like she usually did, she decided to take the high and drift off with positivity. It's always good to go to bed on a more positive note. You'll wake up feeling much better. Like, instead of waking up tired, knowing the day is going to be like, you'll wake up like, yeah, this is going to be a good day. She turned off her desk lamp, curled into bed, and hugged Felix tightly to her chest. Labyrinth, huh? I wonder what I'll find there. Oh. You know, for a visual novel, I really do like that there's a moving character on screen, you know? Normally it's just a still image, not doing nothing. But you have to, like, imagine it. Like, I played Doki Doki, and that's kind of what it was. You had to imagine they were moving. You had to imagine. They would occasionally do, like, ugh, but not actually do anything, you know? Until Yuri did the sad thing. We don't need to talk about that, though. My heart still aches for Yuri. Amazing! As Serena strolled into the expansive library, she couldn't help but proclaim her surprise due to not only the large size of the building, but also how many books it was able to hold. No matter where she looked, there were more books than she had ever seen in one place. More than she could even begin to count. She wondered if the workers, or even the manager, knew how many were within these walls. Well, I mean, if the background is anything to show for it, there's not very many. Shh. She was so surprised, in fact, that she didn't even realize how loud her proclamation was. She quickly threw her hands over her mouth, and her cheeks turning bright red in embarrassment, as she gave a polite bow to the woman who now had her finger raised sternly over her mouth. I should have done this. See, that's the problem with wearing this thing. I sometimes forget where my old beak is. Serena assumed she was a librarian by the way she was stacking books neatly away just in the left corner, pausing only to shush those who made too much noise to disturb her and the library's guests. Quiet, you! Sorry. Even though she said this as softly as possible, by the way, the librarian was still glaring at her. She expected the woman to get mad again. Instead, the librarian just shook her head and continued filing away book after book like Serena didn't exist anymore. Librarian ain't playing around. Serena let out a relieved sigh, placing one hand on the cloth strap of the bag looped around her shoulder. So, I mean, like, she's moving, but we're not gonna... I doubt visual novels are going as far as to actually show that happening, you know. The bag was rather heavy, containing her college textbooks and notes, as well as Felix, whose head was peeking out like a curious cat peeking out of a box. With her other hand, Serena lifted the labyrinth pamphlet, raising it up to compare it to the building herself. Like I often say in response to vacation photos, there's nothing quite like being there in person. Even though the picture was an exact replica of what it looked like before her, and if you ask Serena to spot the difference there, it'd be very little spot, except as possibly the placement of a few different book spines, and the people scattered about being here just felt different. The smell of books in the air, the sound of the crisp pages turning, the feel of the book spines, that is something Serena firmly believed you could never replicate. Right on. And from the large crowd that had gathered inside Labyrinth that day, many people seemed to agree. There's quite a lot of people here today, Felix. She whispered quietly to her fox blush, so used to talking to him that it was just a reflex. Fortunately, she kept her tone quiet enough that no one even looked disturbed. There were people on all the floors she could see, on the main floor and up 3 rising dark wooden staircases, and she assumed people flooded the basement below, down a staircase she could just make out on the top left. Or to the left, sorry. Oh, man. Some people were alone, tucked into corners, groups at tables, and pairs hidden by bookshelves. There were people standing next to each other, others tracing their fingertips over the book spines and discussing which one to grab. Group students copying notes from textbooks into notebooks, and multiple people sitting by themselves in lamp-lit corners just tuned out from the rest of the world, with their favorite books in their laps. Serena supposed it made sense that it would be busy due to the fact that it was a Saturday, and this was a college town, as well as this town's main attraction. I'm surprised to know a library is the main, the big jam. I'm sure there's got to be places that have that, but I don't feel a library is usually the big, to do in a town. Like in my particular neighborhood, one of the bigger things we had is an ice skating ring, and that poor thing is like seen much better days. I actually did volunteer work there once. Well, I was with my school, but it was like I still went and did it willingly. To help try and fix it up. It's a lovely place, minus the lack of a roof, but that's only a problem during the rainy season. Let's see, it still made her a little nervous to be around so many people, even if they were all silent or only taking, sorry. Sorry, I'm getting a little brain fart here. Let's see, if they were only silent or only talking in hushed tones. But more than that, she had another big problem on her hands. Where should I even start? When she looked around, at which at first was in complete surprise and amazement, all she could feel now was overwhelmed. There were probably billions of books here, hundreds of selections. It wasn't as if she had a directory, and she was not exactly fond of asking that female librarian for one. She looked at her pamphlet, but all it had was background on the pounding of the library, pictures on the shelves, and staircases going up, and address and profound library quotes. Literary quotes, my bad. All she had to rely on now was her own instincts, which she was often wary of. Pretty bad when you can't trust your own jam, Can I do this? Hang on. She didn't know why, but she decided to make light strides toward the left stairs first. The basement. Perhaps she thought people would be scarcer down there, and at every library or bookstore she ever went to. They always had the best and rarest books in the most tucked away sections. At the top of the stairs she could see the dark staircase leading down, but she couldn't quite see the bottom from there. She looked worriedly at Felix, but her fox plush was silent. I like that face. Maybe I better not go down there just yet. Serena whispered again, though something was urging her down there. She couldn't tell exactly, but it was like some outside force was telling her to face her fears and take a leap this time. She steadied her nerves, let out a deep exhale. She tried to focus on the fact that there was indeed a red arrow pointing down, telling customers there were more books down below. The fact that she was being invited down by the library itself made her feel a little bit better. Ooh, dark. Tiptoeing down the stairs, thankfully lit fairly well by multiple hanging light bulbs overhead, Serena moved her eyes from left to right. Her heart was hammering against her chest. She had been terrified by going into the basement alone since she was little. Like most normal children, her mother always assured her. To be honest, though, she was often terrified of going into unknown places alone. Well, that's a... hang on, let's make it so the words go faster. Yeah. There you go. Which, with how shy she was often quite a problem due to the fact she found it difficult to make friends. Again, that's a pretty common problem. Like, unless you find a place and people that really you can just connect with, I feel it's slightly difficult to do those things. She'd even been having problems sleeping in her lone dorm the last few weeks, though she assured and promised her mother she'd be fine. There's nothing down here. There's nothing down here. Whispering it to herself rarely kept her from shaking, but it did help her mentally. If you say something enough, it becomes true. Facts. She always heard, so if she says that there's nothing here, then it'll just be her and books. It'll be a dream come true. Oh, you sure about that? Hello, fox girl that definitely somehow knew what I was reading. Ah! Serena screamed bloody murder, so she was sure they had heard her from the main floor. But disturbing the other library guest was the least of her worries. Her foot slipped halfway down the steps due to the sudden voice causing her to slide on their butt all the way down. She winced at the bottom just before turning her head up in horror to the owner of the voice. Leave me alone! When she looked up, she looked into the eyes of a hungry fox. Oh. A fox who was studying her intently, as if on the prowl. I'm not gonna lie, when she's saying those things, and then I look at Fox Girl, I'll be honest, my mind's going toward the gutter. I'm sorry. She's being hunted, she thought, and she couldn't bring herself to move. You're the one who came into my lair, though. Shouldn't you apologize for intrusion? I'm sorry, please, just let me go. The fox raised a hand out to grab her, and Serena began to cry in terror. Never would she have expected her paradise, her answer to all her problems, would be her tomb. She never even got to say goodbye to her parents, her little brothers, to even make a friend in Everton, or finish her debut novel. It was all over now. She clenched her eyes shut, too terrified to watch what would inevitably be her end. So if anyone's seen my Doki Doki playthrough, you'll know my reading starts to get a little sloppy. But instead of hearing a growl or a snap, she heard a light-hearted sound she hadn't heard from another in a long time. Slowly she creaked her eyes open and found the fox on her knees laughing. She had her arms wrapped around her stomach, as if to hold her guts in, as her body shook with amusement. Oh, sorry, I thought I saw something. Huh? Serena herself was beyond confused. Wasn't this fox just going to eat her for trespassing? Relax, I'm not going to eat you. It's just a joke. A joke? Yeah, you know, a prank. I heard you coming down the stairs and thought I'd have some fun scaring you a bit. But I honestly didn't expect you to fall all the way down the stairs and start crying. At this, the fox stopped laughing and looked over the other with a twinge of worry in her lilac eyes. She raised a hand right in the back of her neck awkwardly. It really was just a stupid prank. I hate to see girls cry. You didn't sprain your ankle or anything, did you? I don't think so. Now realizing she was out of harm's way, Serena's heart rate and shaking began to calm down. She looked around and began to move her ankle side to side, but honestly, the only things that were hurt were her butt and her pride. To fall for such an obvious prank, fall down the stairs, and even cry in front of a stranger. Maybe it would have been better if the other had actually eaten her. Sorry. I'll make it up to you, okay? Can you stand? Fox Girl stood up to her full height, holding out a hand to help Serena up. She wore a broad smile on her face, but Serena could tell it had a twinge of nervousness in it, as if she was worried about offending the other with her gesture. But Serena definitely didn't want the other to think she wasn't grateful for the gesture, or offended, so she took it, probably a little too greedily, and stood up to her full height, which she noted with a frown was about a head shorter than the Fox Girl's. Poor little bugger. I mean, she got ears, though. Like, let's say if these two were at their actual height on the screen right now, her ears easily outshine the fox's height. Thank you. My name's Layla. It's just me down here, so you don't have to worry about anyone else seeing that. And I'll try to erase it from my mind, but no promises. At this, Layla blinked. And though Serena felt her cheeks heat up a bit, she also found herself crossing both her arms over her chest in annoyance. She was thankful that no one else was around to see her make such a scene, but she was definitely not happy that the other had pulled such a prank at all in the first place. Serena. And you better have a good reward for this. Like the rarest book in the world or something. Serena, huh? It suits you. You definitely have that innocent, quiet nature about you. Don't make fun of me. It wasn't. It was a compliment. And I don't know about the rarest book in the world, but I have a feeling I could help you find a book you might be interested in. Really? You'd do that? Whenever it came to books, Serena was always quick to forgive. Not that she was the type to hold grudges anyway. But with the suggestion that Layla help her find a book to ease all her worries and into obscurity, it was as if what had happened was erased completely from her mind. What can I say? I live to please. What exactly are you looking for, anyway? Well, I came here for a few reasons. But I guess the most important reason is a book to help me write one. Oh? A little novelist, are you? Not at all. At least not yet. I came here to look for inspiration to write my first one, but I have no idea where to even look. For a moment, Layla just studied her. Serena wondered if there was something on her face, or if the other was just perplexed by what she had said. She looked at Layla nervously, wondering what was running through the other girl's head. Follow me. Without hesitation, or to see if Serena was really going to follow, the fox girl turned on her heel and began to head further into the depths of the library. Or as Serena was going to call it from now on, the fox den. With worry but also a spring in her step, Serena followed the fox further into the labyrinth, wondering what she might find. That's a lot of books in the basement. Are you sure you should be following me all by yourself? I'm a fox, you know. Layla flashed the other a quick, mischievous grin to which Serena blushed and puffed out her cheeks in annoyance. I can decide who to follow on my own, thank you very much. And though you may look intimidating, it doesn't matter whether you're a fox or not. I could be a killer for all you know. Nice. That's how you turn that shit around. Layla gave a short chuckle, looking Serena up and down in an amused way as they walked further into the basement. Really? You? A killer? Okay, fine, I'm definitely not a killer. Not even a little bit violent. But that doesn't mean you are either, just because you have sharp teeth and intense eyes. So I've got those killer looks. Good. Nice. Serena's cheeks were no longer puffed out as she studied Layla's lithe form as she turned around and continued leading the other further into the labyrinth. Did the fox girl want Serena to think of her as a killer or not? The bunny girl furrowed her silver eyes in confusion. You know, as they're talking about, like, all the, like, they point out, like, the eye colors and all that, the character design is lovely. She really didn't understand Layla's meaning at all, but she supposed she had never met a fox girl before, or known Layla long enough to understand her antics. Like what you see? Serena blushed wildly, instantly looking away. She realized she might have been looking a little too intently, so much so that Layla might get the wrong idea. It's not like that. You just had a stray hair is all. Is that so? Quite an intense face to be making over just a hair. Ah, she said hair. Not as in like hair though. Funny joke. Layla began to chuckle at her own joke, and Serena rolled her eyes. Yeah, that's one of those Jesus jokes. She couldn't help but think Layla's pun reminded her of one of her dad's infinite lame jokes. Yeah, that was definitely a dad joke. Seems like even 2 hours away, she still couldn't escape them. That wasn't even remotely funny. Really? Then why am I still smiling? I mean, she got a point. If you make your own self laugh, good enough, right? Despite herself, as Layla turned around and gave the other a huge grin, Serena found it hard not to smile as well. She even chuckled a little, realizing there's no point in dampening the mood. Alright, alright. It was a little funny. Suddenly Layla stopped. Serena froze in place, glad that she was able to stop in time and didn't run into her other awkwardly, as she often did when trying to cross a busy store street. Layla's eyes, though they were dark in color, gleamed brightly in the dimly lit room they had just entered. I feel like I need to go back to like grade school and learn how to read, you know? I'm sorry if I look like I'm looking in the corner like I'm checking something. I'm not used to having two screens to look at. She gazed at Serena with an intent expression that the bunny could not identify. Are you okay? Serena meekly tilting her head in confusion. Was it something she said? Or did? She couldn't help but think, was the other upset at her? She clutched her bag to her chest tightly, her body tensing up as it always did when she felt the confrontation about to arise. Your smile. Layla spoke softly, softer than Serena had heard her talk this whole time. And she was so serious that it was starting to make Serena even more nervous about this encounter. But before Serena had time to reply, Layla reached out a hand, which, to the bunny girl's surprise, was super smooth to the touch. The fox hand gently caressed Serena's cheek, which began to turn red in embarrassment at being touched in such a doting way. Oh. It might be the brightest thing I've ever seen. Oh, wow. That's kind of like a stranger danger moment. The bunny girl found herself completely still, her heart dancing in rhythms as she had never felt before. Here she was in a deep basement with a stranger who was now caressing her cheek and looking at her with such an intense stare, she didn't quite know what to make of it. That's called the get the fudge out of there moment. No one had ever looked at her like that before, as if their attention was solely encapsulated just by her presence. As if they were scared they would miss something she did and didn't dare look away. And to say her smile was extraordinary, bright, Serena felt her bottom lip quiver, unable to reply in any other way. Sorry, I acted without thinking again. Here, this is what I wanted to show you. It was as if someone slapped Serena in the face. The fox girl retrieved her hand quickly, turned so fast that Serena couldn't see her expression. Did she make the other upset? Was there something she was supposed to say in response? But it seemed like as Serena finally willed herself to take a step forward into the next room, the moment to discuss had passed. Amazing! What is all this? Serena's attention was quickly grabbed by the large sea of books that surrounded her. Yeah, there's a lot of books. Hundreds of books were scattered. Some filed neatly into the bookshelves, barricading the outskirts of the room. Some in stacks covering a pair or two ornate coffee tables, spaced out perfectly apart to take up the middle section of the room. And some scattered across the floor by themselves or tucked away in numerous cardboard boxes. There were so many dark wood shelves you couldn't even identify the wallpaper behind them, and Serena could just barely make out the floor creaking under their feet due to the so bright red carpet covering it. A lot of reading, I gotta make sure to breathe. The books, she noted, all had unique, faded bindings, but many looked dusty and in disrepair. This is where the books go when they either don't get sold or they aren't found in the directory. They get stashed in here, basically up for grabs to anyone willing to take them home. I call it the book graveyard. Though I feel like I may have stolen that from something. It's a cemetery, actually. But are you sure these are just up for grabs? See for yourself. At a question, the fox girl pointed to a sign by the doorframe, a sign that the bunny girl must have missed on her way in due to the surprise of seeing the room for the first time. The sign read, "Free books inside," and as Serena went to go pick up a book off the ground, she found that it had no scan bar to check it out. Her hands were rewarded with a thin layer of dust coating them, but Serena didn't mind. But why show these to me? Aren't these the books nobody wants, that everyone would try to avoid? At that, the fox girl strode over to a book on the coffee table that was half opened. She picked it up, She picked it up and glanced over its contents for a second before returning her gaze to Serena. Before this morning, I didn't know this book existed. No one knows it. But within the first 2 hours of store opening, I've already been through 200 pages. I didn't realize until I heard you creeping down the stairs how much time had passed. That must be a really good book. Serena could see Layla was wearing an old wristwatch, one that showed it was precisely noon. The bunny girl had tried to get here when the library opened, but ended up oversleeping due to turning off her alarm instead of hitting the snooze, as she often did on days she could sleep in. She herself found 200 pages to not be much of a daunting task anymore, due to how greedily she devoured the books. But to read that much in 2 hours especially, with the disturbance to boot, Serena found pretty impressive. But if it's so good, then why didn't it get sold? Why is it here? Because people only care about the novels everyone else talks about. That's how it is with everything, you know? Yeah, like this is almost referencing just the world in general. No one cares about some random offbeat thing. Unless half the planet's talking about it, no one cares about it. Like even games here. Like I played a game recently, the Duchess Opal, and from what I could tell, there wasn't much news about it. But then when I played it, like people were surprised that someone gave it attention. And it's a nice game. I liked it. If you're if you're watching devs of Duchess Opal, I tell me when more games come out. I'll gladly play them again. But anyway, yeah, it's like you'll hear everyone talk about the same stuff over and over and over and over again. Like right now, for instance, I know I'm supposed to be doing the game here, but I'm kind of proving this character's point. You look at the PlayStation 5 or the Xbox Series X that came out, nobody shuts up about those things. And don't get me wrong, I want one. I 100% want one. I'm not gonna lie about it. But, like, how many people remember this? Where it started. No one cares about that anymore. You play an old game, most people be like, I asked a kid once, what is this Pokemon's name? And it was a Gen 1 Pokemon, and they're like, I don't know. But I know what was it? They knew about Gen 6 and up. They didn't know anything before that. And I was like, where do you think this all started? But anyway. Yeah, that's just how the world is. Unless everyone's talking about it, most people don't tend to care about those little things. And that's something that should be stopped. Like, trends, trends are a thing that have existed forever. But sometimes I think trends make people forget things that were, big when they first happened. But trends just go by too fast. We barely ever have time to soak anything in anymore. I don't know. Maybe I'm just ranting. But anyway, let's go ahead and get back into this, shall we? They don't talk about these obscure novels made by a nobody in the middle of nowhere. So they end up here, where no one knows about them. Nobody except those who come to look. Serena looked at the book in her hand, wiping off the rest of the dust on her faded leggings and opening its faded red cover. In curiosity, she read the title, typed neatly in swirling italics, The Starless Magician. She for sure had never heard of that book as a title before, or as that as a book title. And she found herself turning the book to the first page and began to devour it like she had any book that crossed her path, except those books she found empty, despite no matter how many words they held within. Before you start, you should probably sit down. The fox girl herself had already made herself at home, sitting in the corner of the room with the book in her lap. She patted the space on the rug beside her, inviting Serena over to come read with her. Apparently, Serena noted, there were no actual seats down here, so they'd have to make do with sitting on the old rug. Not that Serena herself minded, as long as she could curl up with a good book. Serena clenched her bag over to over her heart again, wondering if it was wise to be sitting so close to a stranger. By the way Layla looked at her with those inviting eyes, and the invitation to read a new book no one else knows, Serena found it was impossible to resist. Right. Let's see. Well, I guess I ranted a little wild, didn't I? Anyway, Serena made slow, cautious strides over and lowered herself onto the floor as gracefully as she could. She sat down about a foot away from Layla, who was now giving her a proud smile. Once you're done reading that one, a whole new world will have opened up to you. And from what Serena knew about novels, she knew Layla was telling the absolute truth. Every novel she found led her into a different world she would never have been able to enter on her own. Video games are the same, I think, but not... I feel books, you can be more quiet and absorb it more, Books were like portals to another dimension, and once you stepped through, always stayed with you. Serena steadied herself, book in her hands, and began to devour her first forgotten book. As she began her journey into this book's world, she wondered if this would help her on her journey. But she could only find out one page at a time. I like it. Before she knew it, Serena had devoured another book. But it was different this time. This one was a forgotten book. A book no one knew, a book that had been tossed aside as if it didn't exist. And yet its story was alive in her now. She closed the book's cover, placing it over her heart. That good, huh? Ah! Serena had a tendency to block out tendency to block out the outside world when she was reading. She also had a tendency to be quite startled when someone or something broke her out of that world-diving trance. She let out a couple deep breaths before facing the fox again. You really shouldn't scare people like that. You know, I could have had a heart attack. Sorry, I guess it's just my nature. At this, Serena gave her a long, calculating glance. This wasn't the first time today, the day of their fated meeting, that the other had said something along those lines. She wondered how the other meant her words, how she saw herself. Did she say those words with pride? Proud of being intimidating enough to affect people? Or did she say those words to hide a fear that was eating away at her? Serena couldn't even begin to tell, for a day was barely enough time to get to know somebody. You know, you're much more than what you are. You're not just a fox. You're Layla, the girl who showed me this amazing place, who introduced me to this book and probably many more, and I don't know if I could ever repay that. So thank you. Thank you for being you. That's nice. Serena gave her a bright smile, the second she had given her that day, and Layla's cocky grin faded from her face. Instead, what replaced it was that first of a surprised look, one that shows she was completely caught off guard by the other statement, which soon molded into a small smile of contentment. You really are something, you know that? Well, that's good. I might have a crisis if I find out if I'm not really anything. As Serena's poor excuse had a joke, both of them fell into a fit of chuckles, which soon swirled into a tornado of laughter. A few minutes felt like forever, and they ended up laughing so hard that their stomach ached and tears of joy fell from their eyes. You are seriously too much. Really? At that, Serena's smile faded a bit. In her mind, she had always been average. Besides English, she had never really been good at anything. She wasn't crafty. She was never good at sports. She was quite terrible at socializing and had very few, if any, friends at all. And the only hobby she could talk about was reading, a topic on which few people she knew could actively participate in without boring them to tears. You're more than you know, Serena. At those words, Serena turned to look at Layla's warm smile, and she felt all her worries begin to disappear for a moment. Someone else was talking to her. Someone believed in her. Don't turn my words against me. But from the way Serena was smiling, Layla knew she wasn't upset this time when she retaliated like before. She was playfully jabbing back, a skill which she hadn't much time to cultivate with her non-existent social life. In response, Layla just shrugged. I couldn't resist. Serena was still cradling the book in her arms and gave it another look. She began to think about why she had come here, what she had hoped to find, and she found more than she ever bargained for. A story about magic and using it to light the night sky, for others to guide their way, or at the very least your own way. I love this book. I can definitely tell by the way you haven't let it go since you picked it up 3 hours ago. 3 hours? Without asking, Serena lifted Layla's watch arm towards her. Wow, just give me that! What's the time? And lo and behold, the clock had already struck 3 p.m. She let the other's arm go and said a silent apology, to which Layla just shrugged in indifference. It didn't feel like 3 hours had passed at all. And Serena found that she still had so much more she wanted to look at, to read. She hadn't even come up with a plan or synopsis of her novel yet, or actually studied for any of her classes. But perhaps, she thought strangely, she had made some points on the socialization level, which is pretty good. Which may even escalate to friendship. She hoped. Did you finish your book? Serena suddenly remembered that Layla was already halfway through reading a book she had already really liked when she introduced it down the steps. Yeah, and started a new one. When Layla raised the book now in her lap, Serena noticed that it was definitely not the same book she was reading before. This book had golden letters curving down its spine and looked to be about a fourth of the way read from the place Layla marked it with a small felt bookmark. Have you always loved reading? I suppose. I was a little more adventurous as a child, but always running out to play and all that. But sometimes after I became a bit more solitary, books were my escape, and I've been unable to keep myself from them. Sounds pitiful, doesn't it? Serena wondered what could have changed. Perhaps she thought people just changed and become new people over time. Somehow, though, she could tell something happened to make Layla change. Though the circumstances might be hard to digest, she was glad Layla chose to become an avid reader. After all, it led them both to this point. Serena shook her head firmly. They are an escape, but they also teach and help you grow. Books are portals to everywhere. How could you not want to explore them? To learn all about these places and worlds just laying beyond the surface. At that, Layla's warm smile returned. She seemed happy with the sentiment, and she couldn't deny Serena's words. Though Serena did not know the details of the other's past, much like Layla didn't know her own, she felt content that someone else had at least appreciated books and her understanding of them. So what now? Want to find another book? We'll keep going. Honestly, Serena had no idea what the next step was. She didn't expect to read a whole novel in one sitting. And she certainly didn't expect to be reading right alongside a fox. But there they were. I think I need to think about what my novel should be about. Well, I'm all ears if you want to discuss it. I've got nothing but time. At this, Serena gave the other a curious glance. Why did the other choose to come to Labyrinth in the first place anyway? Surely she wouldn't have known about the forgotten books down here. But it was something Serena couldn't bring herself to ask with her how new their relationship was. I haven't quite sorted it out yet, but I will. I have faith in you, even though I barely know you. Which is weird. But I suppose not as weird as sitting next to a stranger reading her forgotten books all day. Yeah, I guess so. Serena chuckled at that, unable to deny Layla's claim. It was strange how fate brought them together that day. How they managed to be so content in each other's company after a little time of knowing one another. Sometimes you just meet those people. Like, I have a few friends that, like, within the first minutes, we were all chill. Perhaps Serena thought it was just the kindred spirits of book lovers. Or perhaps it was the fate that had something more in store for them. Back in her bedroom. Wow, that was a big time skip. Back in her bedroom, after a decently short and uneventful walk home, the rabbit girl began to contemplate how her evening had gone. Serena had spent the rest of her time that day at Labyrinth staring at a notebook with a pen in her hand. She scribbled some thoughts down and then crossed them out one after another by the dozens. Occasionally she would look over at Layla, whose fox ears were tilted in focus as she devoured another forgotten novel. I like how they're using the word devour to read the books. Not wanting to bother her, Serena kept at it in hopes that something would come to her. A bet that she would have lost if she had been putting money on it. I can't believe I couldn't come up with a single thing. Turning back on it, she had multiple chances to ask Layla for help. Layla stayed with her the whole evening. After all, up until the library closed just as night fell. In fact, Layla told her she would be more than willing. But she couldn't bring herself to ask. Not only was Layla practically still a complete stranger, but she also hated interrupting anyone. Especially when they were reading. Reading to her was precious time that should never be interrupted. Unless someone was dead or dying. Which, unfortunately, neither of them had to deal with. Which, fortunately, not unfortunately, neither of them had to deal with on Saturday. It just didn't feel right asking her about something like that. A book was a very personal thing to Serena, something you put your heart and soul into. And she didn't feel the way she was okay with opening up to someone she just met quite so intimately yet. Maybe it wasn't a big deal to others sharing novel ideas out into the ether as if it was a little more than pitching a sales idea. But to her, it was like cutting off a part of her soul and handing it to another. She just wasn't ready for that kind of commitment. You understand, right, Felix? She was sitting on the side of her bed, her fox-plush's arms tucked between her thumbs, as she held him up in her lap. She gazed into his eyes, but she couldn't find any answer. She took that as his way of saying you should do what feels best to you. But the problem was Serena didn't know what that was. What should I do? It was a question that hit even young adults, especially those in college. Yeah, that's something everyone asks themselves, no matter what part of their life they're in. What do you do? I'm kind of still asking myself that. Once you made the commitment to go to a university, especially if you or someone important to you sacrificed so much for you to be there, then you felt as if you had to have a plan, an answer. But how do you decide what to do with your life? How do you make that dream a reality? But the more Serena thought about it, the more lost she felt, the more questions she had. She could take an infinite number of paths, but which one was the one she was meant to walk on? And what if she took the wrong one? Where did her story truly begin? I wish I could just wake up and be an author. Just write and read forever. It was a dream she had since she was young, cuddled up in her blankets with a book close to her. When she was too young to read, her mother read to her. But as soon as she could formulate sentences on her own, she began to pick up novels all on her own. Some of them were more difficult and not to her taste as a young reader, but she always appreciated them and what they took the time to say. Even if she herself wasn't all that moved by it. Perhaps I should just write what's on my mind without thinking too much about it. But wouldn't that seem kinda... I mean, can I really just throw up on paper and expect it to be good for someone to like it just because it's my real thoughts on paper? The thing is, that is how it works. Like, you could do that, though. Just express yourself. Oh, whoops. I think I just skipped something. Hang on. These things do have a way to look. She looked down at her fox plush, who she could have sworn scrunched up his nose in distaste at her. She chuckled a bit and gave him a pet. Sorry for the analogy, Felix, but I just can't decide. If I think too much about it, I can't write at all. But if I don't think enough, then I worry it won't have any weight to it at all. And so is the crutch of the writer. To constantly worry whether the substance of one's work was enough. To wonder if it was too blunt or too detailed. To constantly dance between the void of thought and instinct. Perhaps I can ask Layla tomorrow, and she can help me decide. If she cannot decide on her own, then she could ask a fellow book lover. The only person she felt confident talking to one-on-one is in this town. She knew the other couldn't tell her how to write it, as the words and ideas had to come from her own soul. But if the other could steer her in the right direction, then Serena felt it was worth the ask. Let's hope she's there tomorrow too, Felix. Otherwise, I might never know when I get the chance to ask. At the thought of not being able to see Layla tomorrow, she frowned. She knew this person was still a stranger, and they weren't exactly friends or even acquaintances at this point. But she felt a sort of strange kinship with this girl, as a fellow reader and book lover, but also something else beyond that she could not yet describe. The feeling that would take quite a bit of time spent around Layla in contemplation to identify. You're right, Felix. I need to stop worrying. I'm sure she'll be there tomorrow again, and everything will be fine. The fox, of course, didn't answer, but she felt Felix agreed with her as she hugged him close to her chest and lay down against the pillows. She nestled herself into a comfortable spot, throwing the blankets over her body and closing her eyes. Everything will be fine. She assured herself as she began to drift off into the world of dreams. Though in the back of her mind, she thought about the forgotten book she had tucked away into her bag, wondering if she too would be forgotten in Layla's mind by morning, just as that book was forgotten and left behind in the darkest pits of the labyrinth. Or perhaps she would be found just as the starless magician had been by her. She supposed only morning would tell. She's late. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and cease there. But we will continue and finish this tomorrow. What is that? I've never played this game, but there's a thing here already. I don't want to touch it. Okay. So, this is The Lost Girl. I plan on continuing it tomorrow. I would continue it now, but I try to avoid making these any longer than I already do. Because I know how people want to get their lives going. So, if you enjoyed the video and haven't subscribed already, please do. I'd appreciate it. If you like the video, peck that like button. Use them beaks. And, leave a comment if you have any thoughts on this. If you have any thoughts on my random rambling I had earlier. And, yeah. Till next time, have a good one. Boop. Oops.